This week's guest, Tate Siemer of Greenlight Capital. He's a heavy hitter with a lot to offer our listeners. So we broke this interview down into two parts. We did not want to cut him off. We wanted you to get it all. This episode, Tate talks about how he got started in real estate, from moving out to Ohio, then to Utah as a wedding photographer. He talks about mentorships and what really helped him to blast off his career. Let's get going. Hey everybody, this is your coach Ian Brown. A few announcements. Yield Coach Capital has opened its doors to investors looking to multiply their money while working with yours truly and our varsity investment team. We recently closed our 170-acre Gainesville, Florida industrial tract, and our limited partner investors are on pace to make 2.5 times or more on their money. That opportunity is gone, but don't miss the next one. Be sure to join our investor list and never miss a deal again. You can join our investor list by the portal, which is in the show notes of this podcast. It's in our Instagram bio link, and you can also do it at yield-coach.com. If you join our investor list, we will get you the free gift, 107 questions to ask a deal sponsor, and a discount to our employee to entrepreneur video course, which is packed full of information and case studies to kickstart your investment success. Now is your time to take the field. I'm your host, Ian Brown. Every episode, we bring you dynamic entrepreneurs, real estate investors, thought leaders, and inspirational guests ready to open up, share their story, the good, the bad, the ugly, so you can learn lessons, gain advantages, and accelerate your own success. Very excited today. I'm to be joined by Mr. Tate Siemer. I'm going to give you a few things on him, but he's a powerhouse. He's the managing partner at Greenlight Equity Group with approximately 600 units and $60 million under management. He's the host of an industry-leading multifamily podcast, The Apartment Gurus. He's also the coach and creator of the Multifamily Octane Coaching Mastermind. Very excited to have Mr. Tate Siemer on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Ian. It's awesome to be here. I'm super excited for this.
So I kind of hinted at it before we hit record, but you've been an inspiration for me, and kind of watching what you've done. I was on your show probably a year ago, and I think from that moment, I've just stayed just a little more in contact, whether you know it or not, a little bit of online stalking, but definitely listening to your podcast. And I feel like I'm kind of been like growing with you, and I'm excited to hear all that you're up to, your upcoming goals. Can't wait to hear about, your new mastermind. So definitely welcome to the show. And for the audience, Tate's podcast is really strong especially if you have a multifamily focus, and it's the Apartment Gurus, formerly the Apartment Guys, but Apartment Gurus. So, anyways, I'm going to kick it over to Tate for a little bit of background. I realize the audience doesn't all know you, so give us some strokes here. Give us the background on Tate.
You bet. Well, first of all, just thanks for your kind words, and you're 50, 60 episodes into your podcast venture here, and which is that's so legit, and so few podcasts even get to that point. But you'll find, I think, if you haven't already, Ian, that hearing stuff like what you just said makes the adventure so much more gratifying and fulfilling, to hear that you made a difference and we're some sort of inspiration, and for you to say that you kind of been following me since you were on my podcast, and getting inspiration from that. It just, sometimes you feel a little bit like you're doing this in a vacuum, but the feedback is so meaningful. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And it's true. I mean, I feel like there's some people you just click with, and I think you have an honesty, a transparency, an authenticity, at times of vulnerability. And it resonates with me, and I know not everybody's equal, but I'm a fan. I'm in your audience, and
thanks, man.
And you're an inspirational guy.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And the first time I heard you actually, and how I ended up tracking you down in your company, Greenlight Equity, and even considering, now looking back, it was probably almost audacious to ask to be on your show, but I didn't know what I didn't know. Right. I heard you on Bigger Pockets, which probably feels like a distant memory now. I don't know how long ago you recorded that episode, but You crushed it. You were awesome. You were such a good guest, in my opinion, that, I actually, what I'll do is I'll text myself or I'll forward myself messages because I'm usually driving while I listen to podcasts. And I remember like texting, make sure you go to greenlightequity.com if that's still your website, and just check things out, check out Tate's platform. And in that interview, you talked about a lot of stuff, but you talked about your long history of flipping single family houses. And it's funny because the first deal that I did, it was commercially zoned, but it was still a flip. It was a flip of a home on commercially zoned land. And I was like, okay, I can either, if I can't sell it, I could lease it to like a plumber, electrician, whatever. It had a little bit of excess land. I could sell it commercial, or I could sell it residential because it was a legal residence as well. Anyways, enough about that deal. But I remember hearing you talk about all these flips, and I was like, it was right at a time where I was pretty much committed to not doing any more single family. And so kicking it over to you, I kind of know some of these answers, but for the audience, a little bit about like that path of flipping single family and kind of your epiphany to say, no more of that. I'm going into the bigger multifamily space.
Yeah. No, that's an awesome place to start. And I guess just a real quick thumbnail backstory. I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up out in the suburbs and played soccer and lived on a cul-de-sac and kind of did the Midwest suburban thing for all the way through high school, and then I went to college in Ohio. And then when I was 26, after college, I got a real wild hair that turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, which was to move out west and to chase a dream to ski in the Rockies somewhere. I didn't know where at the time, but ended up picking Salt Lake City for a few reasons, but mainly the snow quality and the season length that we have here in the ski season. And 23 years later, I'm still a really, really avid skier. But the first 10 years I was here, I was actually a professional ski photographer and started my own business doing wedding photography and portrait photography. So that was kind of my trade. And what I found, 5 years into it, even maybe 3-4 years into it, was that it was one of my first. It was my first true solopreneur venture. And with something like photography, you're the product, right? Like people call you and hire you because they want you. And that makes it very difficult to scale at any level and kind of leverage the business. And so I found that and this is a very competitive market. Utah is very family oriented, and there's lots and lots of weddings and lots of photographers. And so I just found that I wasn't getting to the lifestyle that I wanted to get to through that business. I loved doing it, but just by real random chance had a conversation with a friend of a friend, a guy I still don't know very well, and am not in contact with, but he was this was 2006, right? So this is pre-internet online education. Obviously the internet was around, but as far as like all the wealth of self-education that you can get online now, just what didn't exist. And he was in a class, basically an entry-level investing class, about 45 minutes away, BYU area. And he told me he was flipping a triplex. And for me, that was like such a cool concept and like something I never thought about before. I really hadn't ever thought about real estate as a career, realtor or single family. I certainly never thought about commercial. Like this stuff just never hit my radar. And when he actually showed me, we went over to the property and he showed it to me, and we went inside and everything. And I immediately joined that class and learned from a guru here in Utah, and basically learned how to flip houses and buy and hold houses, single families, right? It was very, like I said, entry level basic investing. And back then, houses in Utah were selling for $100,000, $125,000, $150,000 for a nice house in a nice neighborhood. And now we're 5-6 times that, right? But which is right there is a takeaway for your listeners. Like they buy real estate and wait, right? It's just it seems to always work, especially in a high growth market like Utah. And the last 5 years here have been absolutely insane. But so yeah, I eventually, that was 06. I got my real estate license and worked with other investors and basically just kind of worked the investing scene and flipped a handful of my own houses. And then the crash happened and all of the funding sources that we had been using went away. You know, the no doc, low doc kind of, you know, riskier loans that we were able to get and use to flip houses. And I was like, I never really hit a stride with that anyway. Like even that, you know, even coming from photography, I still experienced both the investing side, the flipping, and the realtor side as is a grind. And, you know, working when you're flipping a house, whether you're making 15,000 or 50,000 or 150,000 on, you know, profit at the end of the day, it's still number one, a paycheck. It's a one-time transactional deal and it's one-off, right? So you're producing a paycheck and that's it. You're not building the next stage of your business. Of course, you're getting skill sets and experience, but and number two, it's risky. Like you can't ever take risk out of real estate investing in general, but in the single family space, amongst other things, you're subject to an appraiser's opinion of your value at the end of the day. And when you do, you know, I've probably done 50 single family deals somewhere in there. You get burned by appraisers, like if you do enough deals, and they can blow up your profit. And so you end up working for a lot in some cases, like, you know, a good flipper is going to probably lose money on 5 to 10% of the deals. Like I had one of the most successful flippers here in Utah that I know told me one time, he's like, Tate, I've lost money on 40 deals, but I've made money on 400 deals. Mm-hmm. So, and this guy's good. Like he's a hard money lender. I mean, he's very well resourced. So anyway, in 2011, I teamed up with my former photography boss, who's now my current business partner. His name's Carl York, and we're best friends and have worked together for a long time in different businesses. And we started flipping hard and heavy in 2011, and basically just kind of, you know, again, like the thought leadership stuff, the podcasting just wasn't really in your face. You know, if you sought it out, and I think Bigger Pockets was probably around back then or getting started. But if you knew of it or sought it out, you'd find it. But it wasn't like today where there's real estate investor associations everywhere and Facebook ads for all the seminars webinars you can go to. And so we just didn't have a really great business model or strategy for what we were doing. And for better or for worse, what we did have was about $500,000 in credit lines against rental properties that we owned. And then we had, you know, full-time availability to do these flips. And so what we ended up doing was throwing all of our own money into these deals. You know, if we had it, we sank it into a deal and then sank all of our own time into the deals and basically did it as fast as we could, but we never leveraged, right? We never developed, you know, a staff or even a project manager, systems and processes on the business level or on the execution level on the construction side. So needless to say, that ended up running its course. And even towards the end, we were doing $1 million houses that were gorgeous. And, you know, even that, same thing, you know, one-off, transactional, risky, et cetera. So, I forget exactly how I ended up connecting with the Utah Real Estate Investor Association out here, but I started going to monthly meetings. And this was 5.5, 6 years ago. With these investor association meetings, right? And I went to one, and the billing for the speaker for the night was Adam AAA Adams. And I'm like, who the heck calls themselves Adam AAA Adams? Like, even if your name's Adam Adams, how do you call yourself AAA? This must be the most cocky guy in the world. Turns out, very long story short, Adam is now one of my best friends. He produces my podcast. He has a company that does that. And he's one of the most authentic, humble guys I know. And to that he came and gave a talk that night that just changed my life, because it was the first time that I ever had somebody look at me and say, you can invest in apartment buildings. You can invest in multifamily commercial. And the way he's so like just engaging and genuine that you believe him when he says something like that to you. So it was a huge, like that mindset shift right there is kind of like the key one for anybody to move from one space to the other, is just getting your head around that it's possible and kind of catching a vision for it. So basically, I started looking at all of at that point, it was like, okay, game on. YouTube, Facebook stuff, Facebook connections, LinkedIn, everything I could get my hands on. And we actually had a 12-unit apartment building kind of fall in our lap. It was our first commercial deal right about that time from a wholesaler that we had done other deals with. And he brought this to us and said, I think you guys should do this deal. And when we actually sat down and underwrote it, and which was kind of a new thing for us, because single family, you can do back of the napkin real easily and not ever get sophisticated with underwriting. With multifamily, you have to have some skills. So, diving into that was such a revelation for us, because all of a sudden we're dealing with income and cash flow and rentals, rent income and leverage and, efficiencies of scale and all the advantages, the tax advantages of multifamily. Like it was this like huge light bulb moment. Carl looked at me at one point in a meeting. He's like, dude, can you shoot a hole in this deal that we're looking at right now? This 12-unit. I'm like, no, dude, like this is very different than anything that we've ever looked at before. And we ended up doing that deal. And then I joined a coaching mastermind with the big kahuna, Corey Peterson. And that was our launch into large scale multifamily. So I know I just kind of shared a whole lot and a backstory, but and I'm happy to share more about kind of the mindset transition that I think it takes to make the jump. But man, it's the best thing we ever did. And I went from being a job site guy, pushing a broom sometimes, like getting properties ready to show and sell and meeting buyers. And I went from that sort of work to just being in love with the whole multifamily space and game, as far as, especially on the acquisition side. So, that's kind of been our superpower is finding and executing good deals. Capital raising was very new to us because we never raised capital for single family. So, we've been working hard on our capital raising game for the last few years, but our superpower is really the broker relations side and sourcing good deals.
Right. Well, you gave me a lot, Tate. I got to kind of pick and choose a little bit, but thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah.
And a couple of things. So on the single family, you mentioned, well, it came to me at the very end, 2 people or 2 moments in your life. So you're a photographer that had never really considered real estate, and then you hear about like a triplex flip. You're like, boom, what's that? Next thing you know, you're in a course or coaching, you're learning. Fast forward, You're like, okay, this is cool and all, but it's still a grind. I'm, like you said, I'm working or staging or project managing, and it sounds like you're coordinating the transaction, the purchase, the debt, everything. So then you're like, man, this isn't a whole lot better. And then almost just like it happened with the triplex, you're introduced to AAA, and it's like, okay, all of a sudden you've got, again, another human being. What I'm kind of getting at is like the power of like influence, mentors, coaching, that world. We as humans, like, we can't really get out of our own head as easy. I mean, how are we supposed to have thoughts, that we've never had before with no stimulus and no input. It's like not how we work. You know, if you go to a third world country, they have no idea of like, you know, sitting in air conditioning, scrolling an iPad. It's never even been presented to them. So it's like a lot of this, and that's partly why I'm naturally very low judgment. I always have been. I'm a fan of people and humanity.
I love that. That's cool. That's a great way to describe yourself. I love that.
Thank you. And it's part of why I like having this show is I authentically like getting to know people. And so, but I think by keeping judgment, one reason why I keep judgment low is for that very reason. Like, why be any more judgmental of someone who's a photographer or someone who's flipping a triplex or someone who has 600 units? It's a matter of like influence, mentorship, execution, not to take anything away from you, but we're all at different stages and we all had people like bestow, you know, this is kind of a Christian notion, but time, talent, treasure. Somebody put those things into you, you know, if you were cared for. And so I try to stay very open-minded and not judgmental, but my point with all that is like, you know, you have these great influences and the next thing you know, you're in this big space that probably feels like unimaginable from the days of doing like wedding photography.
Totally. Yeah. You don't know what you don't know when you make quantum leaps, and especially in the business world, like you just, I had no idea what options were possible. Right. Like, and you're right, from stage to stage to stage. So photography to single family to realtor to small multi. We did some some land deals and a few things outside of single family too, but to multifamily, you really don't know what the next it's like reading a book. You really don't know what the next chapter holds or what's even possible in the next chapter. And so, you know, kind of part of my mission now is just to be an evangelist about this business and the opportunity here. And then, you know, bigger picture, be an evangelist about self-actualization and becoming the best version of yourself is kind of like, you know, my core message for the planet, if you will. And I think that this avenue that we're in, you know, this entrepreneurial space that we're in, and in particular, commercial multifamily, and I'll speak in a second to why I think it's unique, but it is an opportunity to step into the next best, highest version of yourself. Right. And that's where and that never happens in the comfort zone. That happens on the edge when you're pushing the edge and doing new things. And in fact, you're going to be out of your comfort zone. And if having life in balance all the time, every moment is important to you, probably being an entrepreneur isn't a good avenue, because there's times that you got to really push it and push you, right? Like I just finished a 36-hour fast last night. It was the first one I've ever done. And the mindset thing, first of all, I mean, there were like maybe 3 moments of like pretty profound physical hunger, but it was basically all mental. It was such a mental game. And like, you know, becoming masterful in that mindset space is 80-90% of the work, in my opinion, over the long haul. And of course, this is very hard work. Ian, I'm sure you put in tons of hours. This is my one and only business, and I absolutely love it. And so it's my baby. I don't have kids or a wife right now. So, you know, like it's everything in my space. But yeah, I mean, and then just to circle back on your point about mentorship and key people along the way, whether they're paid mentors or, you know, people that kind of show up at the right time, like Adam did for me. He eventually became I joined his mastermind, and which was free, but I was in Corey's paid coaching mastermind really from the first early days of us looking at apartments. And just can't, you know, just to kind of accentuate your point, Ian, like you can't overstate the power of that sort of relationship. What Corey did for us, and by the way, this was pre-COVID. This was actually 2 years pre-COVID. Nobody had heard of Zoom meetings. Webinars were still not a huge thing, and podcasts were out there in full force. Corey had a podcast, and he was the one that pushed me to start my podcast. But We just met in person in Phoenix like 3 times a year. That was the kind of the core of the mastermind. And what he did for us was amongst other things, he was willing to partner with Carl and me on deals, which allowed us to put him in our credibility kit or our company profile kit, which is like a 6-pager PDF that we have printed as well, that basically professionally designed logos, colors, strategy, portfolio, team members, right? So when you're starting out, you don't have portfolio or maybe even team members. So having somebody like Corey that was coaching me, going through deals with me and holding my hand on the education side, to have him willing to step into a deal. We actually never did a deal with him, but the confidence that he gave us to go out and start talking to brokers and creating deal flow was huge. And so if you are connecting with, and look, what you get what you pay for in life, at least in a lot of situations. And I really believe in the paid coaching or paid mastermind model, because the skin in the game thing, amongst other things, is massive. And guess what? When you pay a coach, a high ticket coach, to coach you for a year, his or her skin is in the game, right? Like there's a commitment level and a engagement level that you're not going to get if you don't pay for it, quite frankly. Even in the best, most generous persons, like if they're really successful, they don't have time, right? Like they literally can't afford to do what they can do in a more of a formal, paid situation. So Corey's mastermind was huge. I think we were only in it for about a year. I joined Tim Brott's mastermind. We were in that for 2 years or roughly. And that was great. It wasn't multifamily specific or even real estate specific. He's a multifamily guy, but it was just a really good network, and we got a lot out of that. Currently a member of Raise Masters, which is a capital raising mastermind by a guru named Hunter Thompson. And I have no official affiliation. Yeah, there you go. There's your mug, Ian. Nice. I was using my mug, this Raise Masters mug. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I could be such a passionate salesperson for Raise Masters. Like again, no official affiliation other than being a member. But the value there for, 15, 20,000, whatever he's charging now, is you should be, there's 430 plus members of Raise Masters, a huge percentage of which are all raising capital for deals, for commercial deals. And most of them are in the multifamily space, and certainly Hunter is. So that's a powerful Slack channel, right? Like you put something on the Raise Masters Slack channel and you get 430 eyes on it. Like you can get a lot done. It's really powerful. Plus there's daily coaching calls. Plus there's online video curriculum that's hundreds of hours of deep dive, dense stuff on being a great capital raiser. And I've had a paid life coach over the last 3 years. I kind of hate the term life coach just because it's so generic. He's more of a like performance. He coaches like high level entrepreneurs, athletes, just in his words, champions. Like that's what he's all about. Just coaching really high level people. And he's been transformative for me and at all levels of my life. So for me, like, that is not a secret sauce. It's not secret at all. It's just a key ingredient, at least in my path, to have had these mentors and coaches along the way. And I found that the more I pay for them, like, I've already like 20x the investment in Raise Masters in 6 months. Like I found a joint venture partner to do an $18 million luxury loft conversion in Columbus, Ohio, through the Raise Masters group. They're not in the Raise Masters group. It was a referral, right? But they're basically doing all of the equity on this deal. Like it is an incredible connection and relationship. And we're hoping to do lots of deals with these guys. And And that's just it. Your network is your net worth, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so true. It's so true. And I'll just say this one last thing here is, if you like people like you do, Ian, and you really, you're humble and non-judgmental, and therefore you create a space that's safe for people to like be with and kind of communicate into. That just makes you really good at relationships, right? Because you're just a connector. And that, like, if there's one kind of like superpower or inherent quality that I think just naturally lines up perfectly with this business, it's that liking people, wanting to like really enrich your network, and more importantly, make it a big impact on your network, and come from a place of adding value and the whole go-giver concept, right? So yeah, I mean, again, if you like people and if you're good at relationships, you're good at communication, and pro tip, like, get really good at making people feel good about themselves. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it seems really obvious, but like, how many of us actually consciously do that? Number one. And when was the last time somebody, like, really, like, you did this for me this morning, Ian, but like, like, it's that's something that doesn't happen all day, every day in the human race. And it is such an engaging, powerful tactic to just be somebody that is like an authentic uplifter, that mirrors people's best qualities back to them. That is that's magical stuff right there.
And one thing, and you said a lot of great stuff, so I'm not going to dive into every bit of it. As you move up the asset ladder, you don't have to, but I think 99% of the people, it becomes a team sport.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, you could be a one-off house flipper with a GC that you trust, which is, I know, not quite how you did it. You were even more involved, but you could just be lining up hard money, buying houses, but foreclosure, wholesalers, whatever, flipping, moving on. Can't 1031 because you haven't had it for a year, and away you go, chase your tail. As you move up, I mean, almost nobody is out there taking down over 50, 80, 100 unit, 200 unit deals alone. I'm not saying there's nobody, but even if they are alone, they have people on payroll. Like they might not be actually in the team or in the GP, but I mean, no one does this alone. And I think that's what drew me to, I'm not where you are. I'm kind of like on my way, but I've got an 83 unit that we've had for 5 years with a mountain of equity. And I did that deal with a good friend and partner. I would do deals with him all day long. And we just closed on actually, since joining Raise Masters, kind of unrelated to that, but we closed our first 506c, raised $1 million in LP funds. We bought 170 acres of industrial land outside of Gainesville, Florida. And my partner on that deal is the top industrial. He's a good friend too, but my partner is the top industrial broker for Northeast Florida. So I feel good about that. Really, really good basis on the land, and our investors will do well. But I like it so much. Could I do smaller deals in my backyard and possibly make similar money? Let's just say, for argument's sake, maybe. Yes, I could. But my God, you're scattered, you're alone, you have no one to share your wins and losses with, you have no one to like bounce ideas off of. I mean, I'm married with children, but I don't need to be bouncing my ideas on, value add business strategies for apartments off my kids. And my wife's a criminal defense attorney. So love her to death, but she, her input, has to come with a hedge. So I love moving to where you can treat it like a team sport. And to dovetail on all you said about, paid mentorship and coaching, and if you're going to put together this team, it's a full-blown business. You know what I mean? Like, you call yourself an entrepreneur. Yeah. Part of being an entrepreneur is knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, and just being, in my opinion, you really need to stare yourself in the mirror and be like, what do I like? What do I dislike? What comes easy? Work hard at what comes easy. I always like that expression.
Double down on your superpowers.
Yeah. And so, like, if I'm working hard at what comes easy and doubling down on superpowers, I need to make sure I'm also cutting off the things that are reasonable hourly tasks that somebody else can do. And I think what stops a lot of entrepreneurs is the control, because there are a lot of, just to say it in a slang way, a lot of control freaks in the like the business and entrepreneurial space. And like maybe they rose up with like high control, but they're like on the edge of burnout and they're finally making it. Well, it's a big shift for that guy or gal to stop being a control freak right as they're kind of making it, because they're never going to scale to whatever's next without letting go. You're gonna have to let go of a whole part of that stack of things you need to do, and just have faith, empower these people to get their job done.
Yeah. And if you're one of those people that Ian was just referring to, and you have, or at least have a little bit of that in your space, read Who Not How, which is that author's
Dan
name?
Sullivan.
Dan Sullivan. Thank you. And Benjamin Hardy, I think, helped him write that. And you know, the concept is that your answers when you're, especially when you're growing and scaling, are in other people, right? Systems and processes are important, but the quality and caliber and cultural fit and everything else of the people that you're surrounding yourself with, you know, either as employees or partners or co-GP or whatever those look like that is a heavy determiner of where you're going to be able to go. Well, I'll just share this one again, kind of like quick little story, pro tip. When we did our second deal that we did was a 20 unit, and it was also here in Utah. We only did 2 deals in Utah before we started buying out of state. But when we were putting that deal together, when we were under contract and doing due diligence, I had known this basically tycoon. You know, he's 40-ish years old, and at the time, this was 4 years ago, roughly, he had a $150 million portfolio or somewhere in there, and obviously had plenty of net worth and liquidity. I didn't know him well, but I knew that we would be better with him on our GP, being our second deal. And just, it was a heavy value lift, heavy construction. And so we offered him a position on the GP for nothing, not nothing, but basically to be an advisory partner, to kind of look over our shoulder, make sure that we weren't making any critical errors, and to help out. And long story short, we've done, I think, 5 or 6 deals with this guy. He's invested a lot, hundreds and hundreds of thousands in our deals. He's also raised capital for our deals through his network. And he's sponsored 5-6 loans for us. So, and that started with just adding value to him, right? Like, I think we offered him 7 or 8% of the GP in that 20 unit deal. And you know, that was worth a fair amount of money to him. And then he ended up coming in as an investor and a sponsor, and got quite a bit of the GP from that. But, you know, that's a total who not how kind of, you know, sketch, if you will. And it's a great way to build your business, in my opinion. You know, think about somebody high level that's like where you want to be in 2 years, 3 years. Go, obviously, meet them, get to know them, and then start figuring out how you can really add value to that person, not just showing up at lunch and saying, "So how can I help you?" Right? Like, go get a deal and bring them into the deal and make them, you know, 6 figures over the course of a few years. That's adding value, and that's building a relationship that is going to have legs and is going to, you know, they'll be very interested in basically being essentially part of your team. So, you know, one of the best things we ever did was bringing him on into that deal, for sure.
I think, was it yesterday? In the past 2 days, I was asked, you know, about getting into investment and, you know, what do you do? And it was just a complete newbie type question, super wide open general. And I just wanted to give kind of a wide open answer. And it's funny you mentioned that. I was like, you know what, to say it plainly, because it's not somebody who even understands like what we're talking about. Yeah. So to say it plainly, if you don't have money, which is most people, like most people don't have the money to be multiplying money. Most. Yep. If you don't have money, you need to commit to developing a skill, you know, right. And skill development can be free or cheap, and then with that skill, you're essentially gonna be like trading that skill, not to go back to that time, talent, treasure thing, but you're gonna be leveraging like your human capital into a deal. And and I think what made me think of it is when you said find a deal, because I do think I think the most powerful skill, at least it's what I think as I sit here right now, other than just having a mountain of money and sitting back and being like an advisory LP type, which is, I know a lot of people's end goal, is just have a thick, callous skin, know the deal criteria that your dream client or investor wants, and be willing to go out there and beat the bushes and handle the no's and handle the objections and track down a deal. You will be. And then my other advice for those that are in that bucket, know that you actually have a golden object at that time. I think it'd be easy to doubt yourself because you maybe quote unquote came from nothing and no money and developed a skill and found a deal. That's your chance to be a little bit, I hate to use the word greedy, but you need to be a little bit self-interested at that time, because you have a golden goose if you find that deal for that investor. And shoulder up and be ready and try and keep a meaningful interest, and that can be your soiree. That can be your way in.
Yeah. And another little piece on that is on the most important thing about the first deal is getting it done, getting it closed, right? So you got to kind of be in whatever it takes mode on the first deal. It's different when you get into subsequent deals, but the first one's the hardest one to do. Michael Blanc talks about the law of the first deal. It is almost invariably for everybody like the hardest deal you'll ever do, because you've never done it before, and there's tons of moving parts, especially when you're syndicating, raising capital. You become a marketing machine. You become an investor relations machine. You become a due diligence. There's contract to close is intense. Like there's a lot of moving parts, and you just want to make sure that number one, you get the deal closed, and that you don't make any really important mistakes along the way, critical mistakes. And having somebody in your corner, whether that's another GP, a coach, or a powerful mastermind with lots and lots of like high level experts in it, all three of those can serve very well to ensuring that all those things happen on your first deal. But you're so right about, like, if you've got a legit deal that pencils well, that's going to provide good returns to passive investors, and it's in a good market, and it's a good vintage and decent amenities, like you've got something there. Like, and there's really two points of value in this business. It's finding deals and finding dollars, right? And so,
well said.
Yeah. So like, and I can't claim that one. That's Lance Edwards, his languaging. But, and by the way, free plug for Lance, he wrote a book called How to Make Big Money in Small Apartments. And I listened to that like 5 years ago, and it was like my first deep dive into the mechanics of this business. And it's not even, he even says this isn't really about small apartments, it's about all apartments. But he said, if I named this How to Make Big Money in Big Apartments, nobody would buy the book, because you can't get your head around that I can do big apartments when I'm starting from single family, or even from not being in real estate. So anyway, that's kind of a marketing ploy, but like, that's a great book, a great audiobook, especially because he reads it. He's got a thick Texas accent. He talks about his business and like he's a fun guy. But so people looking for a resource there, kind of at what it's like to be the lead sponsor, or the lead GP, or basically the deal producer, if you will. I think that's a good deep dive. There's definitely others as well. But yeah, I mean, it's just, again, that the network is your net worth thing. Back to your point too, on the solopreneur, like I would say, if you really, feel like in your heart of hearts that you are a solopreneur or would thrive as a solopreneur, there are some fantastic business models out there, that don't require you to be in a team sport situation. I would say I would state it almost a little more strongly than you, that like, I actually don't know anybody that buys apartments on their own and, does this business on their own, asset management, due diligence, investor relations. It's just a lot. Like, to do all those things well, there's just literally not enough time in the day for one person to do it, and it's a ton. So I've been saying that for, ever since I learned it, which this is such a team sport, and the bigger and badder your team, the more options you're going to have down the road to get bigger, badder deals done.
Mm-hmm. And that was part 1 with Tate Siemer. Check out next week for part 2, where we talk about Tate's awesome podcast and his new mastermind.